Hi, my name is Anne Sermons Gillis, and I'm here today to bring an exciting theosophist to you. Now, I'm a member and on the board of the Theosophical Order of Service. And what we're doing here is recording the lives and the spiritual journey of our contemporary theosophists. So I'm very excited today to have a woman who was born in Austria, but she moved to the United States in 1986. And she's been working and lecturing here since then. Before finding Theosophy, she was a long-term spiritual student, starting even in her teens with her relentless search for the truth of who she is and the truth of reality. She has been studying science, psychology, and philosophy for years. She is currently the president of the DC Lodge. She contributes to the online School of Theosophy and the Theosophical Wiki on a regular basis. She has a law degree from Austria and a master's of fine art in educational technology and leadership. She retired from George Washington University in DC in 2019, and she continues to translate German to English, including the text from the Theosophical person, Dr. Franz Hartmann. And she also teaches yoga. I want to welcome Susanne Hoepfl-Wellenhofer.
Thank you so much for this wonderful and warm welcome. Yes.
So Susanne, I'm going to let you pronounce your name again. I worked at pronouncing it, and you know, it's really embarrassing that I can't pronounce your name correctly. But if you'll give it to us, the real pronunciation in German.
I would be happy to, but you should not feel bad because nobody can say it here, so don't worry about it. So in German it would be Susanne Hoepfl-Wellenhofer, but in the United States it's Susanne Hoepfl and then Wellenhofer or Wellenhofer because the W is pronounced differently.
Yes, but well, I want to welcome you, and you are the president of the DC Lodge. How long have you been doing that?
Well, this is my last month because my term expires in June, and I have been doing it for 3 years.
Okay, and so you're going to pass on the one, or you're going to continue?
Well, you know, everything has changed now because of the pandemic and because we went on Zoom, and once in a while we try to have hybrid meetings, but it's more work involved to set up the program and to send out the invitations via Zoom and to record everything and to upload it. So I'm going to still continue to be responsible for the program. And then the next president and I will somehow split the moderating of the members meeting where we discuss and study the secret doctrine, and the public meeting where we have usually either lectures or roundtable discussions. And what I want to add is, yes, it's the DC Lodge, but we have grown, which has been particularly helpful with the secret doctrine discussion because we have members from other lodges who have joined us and who are more knowledgeable about the secret doctrine than I am, for example. And that has been a wonderful experience.
That's great. Well, so you grew up in Austria, I assume.
Yes, I grew up in Austria, but my mother was Croatian. So I grew up with 2 languages. I grew up with 2 cultures, and then I married into a third culture and with a third language, yes.
Well, were you raised in any religion particularly? Were you given any spiritual beliefs by your parents?
Well, this is the interesting thing is Austria, when I lived there and when I left, was 98% Catholic. And because of an agreement between Hitler and the Vatican, in Germany and Austria, you have to have religion in school. And you have to pay a tax, a church tax, and you have to be married first in the courthouse before you can get married in the church. These were the agreements, interestingly. So we have had religion in school, but both my parents had very bad experience with the church. So they were not religious, but in order to get a good grade, you had to go to church and you had to donate money. And this changed a little bit when Pope Paul II became Paul. Then quite a few Austrians left. And in the meantime, we are 90% Catholic and 10% Muslim because of, mainly because we have immigrants from the war in Yugoslavia that fell apart, and from other countries that had refugees coming to Austria.
So
But
like a
I really was a
forced
searcher.
religion.
So sorry to interrupt you. I was a searcher, and none of the teachers in religion could answer my questions. And then my last religious teacher was an Opus Dei person, and he got me into Opus Dei. And I was very involved with that until I realized that their main purpose, this is how I understood it, this is my personal opinion, was about collecting souls. It wasn't about serving humanity. It was just bringing people or souls to God. And that's when I left and continued my search in other places.
So it sounds like your soul knew the truth, even if you were getting forced with a lot of different facts and being guided in those ways that take you away from yourself.
Absolutely.
Yeah, once you begin this search, are there any living teachers that influenced you tremendously during this search?
No. So I discovered a book called Initiation, Einweihung in German, by Elisabeth Heich. And she was from Hungary, and I inhaled that book. I cannot say it any other way. And I have read it numerous times in German and English since then. And I took to it, I believed it, I had no doubt in it. And since that day, I tried to find everything that would confirm what I read in that book.
It's a good book. I read it too many times. It's been so long, I've forgotten what's in it, but I remember it was really powerful. Well, so how did you find Theosophy in this search? How did you come across Theosophy?
Oh, this is very interesting. I had a student in German from a private group. It wasn't from the George Washington University. And she was younger, and she struggled with certain things. And so I gave her some of my German books about self-help, also about my favorite philosopher, Jean Gebser. And she really took those books, and then she found Theosophy, mentioned it to me, and then I joined the society, just like her. She's still a member. That's how it happened.
I think you said to me that you were a Theosophist long before you found the movement.
Yes, absolutely. And that's why I took to it. I mean, the funny thing is, because I compared religion, psychology, philosophy, metaphysics, took notes, and then created a website. When I read the first, the second object of the Theosophical Society, that was it. And so I knew that was the organization that I would like to dedicate a lot of my free time to.
And so will you just tell what the second object is?
Oh, to compare religion and philosophy, and also the arts and science. And that's what I have been doing before that. And I always believed, the first object, the Universal Brotherhood, which I think is the most important. I always believed in that, especially since I grew up with two cultures, and I felt what it meant to be discriminated, because my mother was, back today she would be called Croatian, but back then she was called Yugoslav. And they were, my parents were born in the 30s, so they experienced the war as children, and I was born in the 50s. And so the Slavic people were subhuman in the psyche of many Austrians and Germans, because they had been indoctrinated with this belief. And that came through with the teachers, because they knew that I was not purely Austrian German. And I remember that they didn't think that I could go to a university, because being subhuman, I cannot be as intelligent as Germans or Austrians. So I think that formed me deeply when I was young. And it was an undercurrent, you know, it wasn't open. It's just, and it took me a long time to figure out what was going on. And so because of this, I believe in the Universal Brotherhood. And I think it's very important to see and understand that we are all the same, all equal, all coming from the same source.
Well, with today's divisiveness in the United States especially, however, all over the world, we need that message more than ever before, because it seems like we're going backwards in some way with social media and so forth. It's created something that's even worse than tribes. It's like warring factions. And even within the factions, there are warring factions.
I agree, and it's not only in the United States, but in Europe you can see too. I follow most of the politics of Europe and the United States and a little bit of the Asian countries. And yes, it seems like we are going back in some areas, but at the same time, this is why Theosophy has helped me personally, because it gives me this trust, this deep trust in the divine, and the ability to step back and just say, this is what we have to go through in order so that it can become better.
Well, I don't know if we have to go through it, but the thing is that we are going through it. And we can, you know, we can win or lose with this battle or this journey that we're going through, depending on how we look at it. And so it can definitely be very useful to go through this. If everything goes good, we get very complacent and comfortable, and we really don't go. I don't know that I celebrate that method, because I just as soon be comfortable, but not really. So one of the cornerstones, changing the subject a little bit, one of the cornerstones of Theosophy is service. And of course, we have the Theosophical Order of Service, and that's the arm of the Theosophical Society, or it's actually a different organization in which we want to be the legs of this doctrine, of these principles of Theosophy. Just what are your thoughts about service?
Oh, I definitely believe in that. Even though it's not part of the Theosophical Order of Service, I do mentor prisoners. I have been doing that for many years. And currently I'm mentoring 3 prisoners. So that's because I believe in reincarnation. I have no doubt in reincarnation. And I believe that it's important to do that. I also have participated you know, of course, we donate to the Theosophical Order of Service and to the organization. But there were, when the pandemic started, there was a great program that the Theosophical Order of Service did. They tried to connect restaurants with hospitals. And I did that twice. I did this for the Fairfax Hospital and the Arlington Hospital in Northern Virginia. Both times, in the end, I decided on a bakery and talking to representatives of the hospitals, because not everybody can get to the food at the same time. And I thought that was a wonderful project, and I like to participate in it. But I also think if you are on the board of your local lodge or study center, or if you are on the board of the Theosophical Society in America, the headquarters in Wheaton, then that would be service. I also have created one course for the online school, but I help with the online school in other ways. So I believe in service, in study, and in meditation. And I'm a national speaker. And so I think that acquiring knowledge is extremely important. But if you have a chance to share that knowledge in some ways, that is the service that speaks the most to me, which worked out very well when the pandemic started because I was able to moderate the Zoom meetings and the online school. I could do everything from here. And the interesting thing, though, is I do get paid for yoga, but sometimes I feel this also as a service because I try to create this atmosphere with the music that work on the chakras. There is a theosophist called Kurt Leland, and he wrote a book about this, and I read that, which music works with which chakra. And I have these electric candles, and I try to have the room as dark as possible at the end. And I read a lot of quotes and philosophical quotes. And so I do feel, though, even though it's yoga and even though it's paid, I try to bring what I learned in Theosophy into this class environment.
That's wonderful. When I ask that if you've done these service projects, for example, the prison project, can you tell that it's made a difference in your life? And if so, what kind of difference has it made? Have you learned something? Have you grown? How's it impacted your life to serve?
Well, it's interesting because the way I mentor the prisoners is that I do invite them to share not only what they have learned in the lessons, but what they are going through. And one of the things that we try to do is not to be judgmental, because whatever a prisoner goes through in this life, we have gone through in a previous life. I'm absolutely convinced. And I would say that has made me more compassionate. It has made me less judgmental. It has made me realize that we all struggle in some ways. The environment might be different, but there is I think he was or British, I can't remember, but the Bachblüten. So these are the Bach flowers. You can get them at Whole Foods and health food stores. He wrote a book. It's like Know Thyself. But I remember reading that he said that the divine will know which environment is the best for us to learn. And so I think because I try to help when I can, it fulfills me, especially now that I'm retired. I dedicate my time to whatever makes me really happy. And I think this is one of the keys to happiness in life in general. If you can figure out at a young age what you would do without getting paid, that's a miracle to figure that out. And that's exactly what I do. But I always like teaching. I am a 3rd degree black belt, and I taught Taekwondo for many years before I taught yoga and at the universities. And I lead a literature circle, and we have been meeting for 23 years. So it just fulfills me. It helps me to learn from other people. You see, when I mentor prisoners, I learn from them too. When we did this project with the Theosophical Order of Service, I was thinking of how hard the nurses and the doctors have to work, and how difficult this is, and how dangerous it is, and how this affects us. So we just develop compassion and understanding. That's how I see it.
So it sounds like in giving to others that you have undone your judgments and learned to be the eyes of love.
Yes, yes. And that's what we have to work on it all the time. That's very important. And that's why, for example, face-to-face meetings like conventions or taking a class are important, because they provide the energy we need to be able to give, and they remind us of staying on the path, giving our best. And so that I find that equally important. You cannot only give, because if you only give, you get depleted. So you need to figure out, everybody is different, what charges your batteries.
Right. So it's not the meetings, the conventions, all of those things really feed us. And it's not necessarily the lessons that give us, but it's the community that has an energy that gives us back. Of course, we get things from the lessons as well, but I'm saying it's more than that. It's more than just the intellectual. It's more than the intellectual feeding. It's a community that feeds us. And in Buddhism, it's called satsang. And that is the community of believers, the community of saints that feeds us. And so it is important that we keep a community.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I completely agree. And our lodge met at our house, several times during the pandemic. We always met outside. So we were lucky with the weather. And the first year we set apart much further than afterwards, but that was needed. It was needed that we saw each other face to face. So the community is absolutely important for keeping us on the path. Yes.
We were starving for community, weren't we?
Absolutely,
In
absolutely.
the pandemic.
Yes.
Well, moving on, what aspects of Theosophy do you think have most influenced your life? You've touched on that, but maybe you could just reiterate some.
Well, there are two things. The one is the belief in reincarnation. I think if you really truly believe in reincarnation, there is something going on inside of you that changes, and makes you understand that we all go through a learning process, and it takes many, 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 many lifetimes, and we all have to learn something different in each life. And so it makes you less judgmental. That's number one, and more compassionate. The second one is meditation. So I am a Gemini, and I remember once William Maida is a speaker that is often invited by the Theosophical Society. And he once said, well, the Geminis are the ones that least likely will meditate, and they need it the most. And it's true. It took me, it's an ever ongoing process, but I'm very disciplined, and then meditate in the morning and at night. And as soon as my younger son moved out, my husband created this beautiful meditation room for me. So I have this sacred space that I'm extremely grateful for, and that I can withdraw to even more than twice a day if I wanted to. And this concept of Universal Brotherhood, that's the third one. And I remember when Pablo Sender, another speaker that's very popular with the Theosophical Society, published his first book about higher consciousness. He had a meditation in the book, and that's the one I start my day with. I don't even get out of bed before I do that meditation, just to remind myself. And I include intentionally in this, when I broaden, going from my house and my neighborhood to the rest of the neighborhood, I include the jail. And I live in Washington, D.C. I include the politicians from both parties, because that's so important, especially right now. And so I would say this has been this really has influenced my life and that the way I deal with it. And I think understanding that there is, that death is not the, that death is just a different state, and that we have to learn something else has also made it easier for me to deal with challenging situations.
So these practices, meditation and understanding reincarnation and believing that, are not things that are on the side or phenomenal. They're actually threads of your life. They're things that sustain you. It's like meditation, it sounds like it's like eating a meal. You have to eat the meal or you're going to starve. And so you meditate daily. And then that belief, as I'm saying, is not something like somebody says, oh, in this grade, and you talk about reincarnation, it gets very phenomenal, but you're saying that it's really a part of the ground of your belief and the foundation of your spirituality. Is that correct?
Absolutely, and where my values come from and what I work on. And I also keep a journal. I have been doing that for years. So so I reflect, on the night when I get up in the morning, I write into the journal, and I reflect about the day in the journal before I go to bed. And I have never, once in a while I might go back to something, but there was a year that was really hard. It was horrible, 2018. And I remember that I was so worried going back and reading over that year. But eventually I made the decision just a few months ago to do that. And I was so surprised about myself and the thought process and all the things that I wrote down and things about my husband that I had forgotten. So, yes, I think this trying to reach the state of self-knowledge, trying to work on yourself and to improve yourself. This is why we are born. This is why we incarnate, because we have to learn certain lessons. Have really helped me. Absolutely. They guide my life. All these principles do guide my life from morning till night. I can say that.
Well, in 2018, when you went through a tough time, did you change what you did daily, or did you continue your practices? Did you continue?
No, I continued my practices. Absolutely.
And journal and everything.
The journaling and the meditation, actually, probably I meditated. I had a few different ritual in the meditation room then, to get through pain, than now. But all the things that I thought, okay, this is what you need to do and this is what you need to work on, I did. And then I didn't realize that all these seeds were set in that year. So I think keeping a journal is really a wonderful thing. And trying to find, I have another friend who is also a theosophist. I think she does the same thing. And she does the haiku moment. I think that's what she calls it. Like, what is the best moment of the day? I don't really do that as much. I'm balanced. For me, it's like this didn't go well, this went well. So I'm trying to step back and say, okay, it's neither bad nor good, but this is what happened. Other people might interpret it as good or bad, or the old me might have interpreted, but now it's like, this is what happened. So it helps.
So you're allowing what is to be.
Yeah.
Allowing what is to be. A lot of people, when they go through tough times, they take their practices and they just throw them out the door. It's like, this doesn't work, this doesn't work. But it's probably when we're the most starving that we need to continue to feed ourselves with the practices, even if we're hungrier than normal. And but if we take these and continue to feed ourselves, we can get back on track. So that's very admirable that you didn't throw your practices out the window when you're going through a tough time.
No, but I do want to share something, because it's a very interesting, and this happened actually years earlier when something started to be, it was an ongoing thing that just got worse and worse, and the worst time was 2018. There was a moment where I thought, I just stop with that. I can't go on anymore. And in my despair, I said, but if I am wrong and I should move on with the way I'm doing things, then I should find a feather. Well, I don't find feathers often, and I went out that day and I found 3 feathers. So somebody really wanted to make sure. One was beautiful, so a grayish blue, and I kept that feather. And that was probably, I don't know, maybe 2013, 14. So it wasn't, I didn't realize it would get worse. But I think maybe that little event helped me to just stick with it and said, this is how I have to do it.
Yes, I've had an experience with a feather too. I had a person that was taking a class from me. She was kind of mentoring me, and she says, well, when do we go to the next phase? And I said, when you find a feather. And she looked down at her foot and there was a feather. And so we went on to the next phase. Do you have any other members of your family that are Theosophists? And for the members that are not Theosophists, have you ever talked about your experience with Theosophists with the non-Theosophist members of your family?
None of my, I have 2 sons and a husband. My husband is very supportive in the sense that we have sometimes guests, speakers who, several times it was couples who stayed with us, and he will cook vegetarian, and he will, show them Washington, D.C. He will do everything. He goes with me sometimes to conventions, and then he does his bicycling or hiking or whatever, and I do my stuff. He knows, he has read a few things, because sometimes when I translate, then I ask him for advice, since English is not my first language. And my sons know about it, but they are not interested. So I'm a Gemini, and so I think for me, being grounded and at the same time walking the spiritual path is important. And maybe that's the reason why I'm married to someone who is not interested, and just always reminds me that we are in this earth, we have to learn, and both things are equally important. That's how I solved that for myself.
Okay. So there's not really any conflict.
No, there is no conflict. My husband supports me. We give each other freedom. He is very relaxed and very supportive. He does certain things on his own. I do certain things on his own, and then we do several things together. Not only every day, but when we go on vacation or do things together. And I think that's important. That is important for a relationship. We are both, retired. I do still teach yoga and do other stuff, but he's fully retired. He volunteers for homeless people. He volunteers for a program with homeless people, and it fits his personality. My husband is all earth. He loves to garden, and he has an organic garden. So there's a lot of theosophical qualities in him. This is my opinion. He's very relaxed, very helpful. He would never use any poison. He pulls out the weeds by hand, which is his meditation. That's the way I see it. He has an organic garden, and he cooks for me so that I have time to volunteer as much as I do. And I do cook once in a while too, but he does the main thing now. When we had kids, it was me. And he is very caring and loving, and not judgmental. I mean, for him, he cleans. They clean. It's a program where where the homeless go and clean up neighborhoods, or prepare baseball fields, or pick up trash, and he does it with them. And they talk to him, and he has learned a lot through that too. So he just does it in a different way. He just doesn't join organizations.
Well, as you said, the divine places is in the place where we can learn the most. And so some people are placed in adversarial relationships, and they may be jealous of people who are in relationships that are easier. But as you said, each thing is really grist for the mill of learning. And even though you've had a great relationship in terms of your support for your belief system, then there are other areas in your life where you've had to deal with challenges as well.
Absolutely. And yes, I mean, I'm not saying that, I mean, I watched David and Nancy Reel, or, we have spent time with Betty and David Bland, or with Pablo and Michelle, and Sender and Chris Bolger and Huli Susano, and then you see couples and you see how they work together. But I that's why I meditate. When I see this, then I meditate on it and say, well, it wasn't meant to be in this life, and there is a reason for that. So.
Yes. So the more we accept what is, the less we suffer.
Exactly. Exactly.
Think for something else, it doesn't work out very well, does it? Well, do you have a favorite theosophical book that you have enjoyed or you like?
There is, and I hope it will be published in English. There is a book by Hartman, and he calls it Yoga and Christianity. And what he does is he takes Meister Eckhart, who almost got in trouble with the church too, who was a mystic, and compares his teachings with teachings from the Bhagavad Gita. So what I like about Hartman is that he basically says we have the same teachings in Europe and in Asia. So I like that. When I started to study Theosophy, I read The Ancient Wisdom by Annie Besant, and I thought that was a very nice introduction. I do like the Voice of Silence, and sometimes I take segments and meditate on it. But I would say that probably the books by Hartman speak a lot to me. And I did publish an article in the Quest, I think in the winter edition.
Yeah, it was a great article.
Yeah, about Franz Hartmann. And it's because of his bridge between the East and the West, in a very good way, that I do like his writings a lot. And he also, became or got involved with the Rosicrucian group in Bavaria. But he remained a theosophist all his life, and was true to theosophical teachings and through to the concept of Universal Brotherhood.
So do you read other things? I know that you read political news and so forth. Do you read other things, the spiritual books? And if so, do you have any favorites or anything you'd recommend from those books?
Well, I have read a lot by his name is Michael Newton, about the destiny of the soul. So I read things that are by or about Edgar Casey. I like those books a lot. They're confirming again theosophical concepts. And Michael Newton is a psychotherapist who coincidentally in one session he used hypnosis, figured out that his patient was in the state at the plane in between lives, and so he has written several books about that. So I do read books by Gary Lachman, by Richard Smalley. I read a lot of books about Rosicrucianism, and because I contribute to the Theosophical Wiki, I do read a lot of biographies, and I am like, I have discovered through Theosophy Jakob Böhme, who lived in Germany in the Middle Ages, who published a book. He's very, very inspiring. He was called the Theosophist because his writings are based on his personal experiences. He wanted to know the divine. I have read things by Paracelsus that are not that easy to read, but I have found nice summaries about his philosophy. So there is, I have read the biography by Constanze Wachtmeister.
Yes, I want to talk about this. I know that you recently did a lecture about maybe some of the unknown women. Certainly, Dora Kuntz was not really unknown, but some of the unknown women in Theosophy. And so would you speak, you can go on and speak about Wachtmeister and Kuntz and Uma Devi, if you would.
Yeah. So when I do the research for the wiki, that the archivist Janet usually recommends or asks me if I could focus on a particular person. So one of the first ones were Hartmann and Rudolf Steiner, but then I discovered Constanze Wachtmeister, and she became for me somehow a guiding light. She was a contemporary of Helena Blavatsky, and but her husband was a minister, and she probably came from a well-off background, and then she moved in with Blavatsky, and they shared the bedroom, and she honestly writes about how, you know, she wasn't 100% sure at the beginning, and how her feelings had changed and what her impressions were. And even after Helena Blavatsky died, she traveled and dispersed all that theosophical knowledge, and went to Australia. I think she went to many lodges in the United States. So I admire her. The second woman was very interesting. Wanda Dinowska was her name. She was a Polish theosophist. And this is this Thursday night lecture. But she eventually, just to keep it short, went to India, and then she met Mahatma Gandhi, who gave her the name of Uma Devi, but she also met the Dalai Lama and worked with him. And she was amazing, an amazing woman. And she became a vegetarian. She talked the Dalai Lama into becoming vegetarian, but he had to change his diet when he got very sick. And after I gave this lecture, I was contacted by some member of the Mumbai Lodge in India, saying that she actually wrote the first book about vegetarianism. And then the last person was Dora Kuntz. Now, I did not research her for the wiki, but I thought it would be wonderful to add her to these three pioneers of the Theosophical movement, because they lived in different times. But there's another woman. She wasn't that long a member of the Theosophical Society, but her name is Henriette Müller, and anybody interested can find the information on the wiki, on the Theosophical wiki. But she was an interesting woman, and she was very well off, and she didn't pay taxes, because she said, without representation, I'm not paying taxes, because she wanted women to have the right to vote. So when you do this research, and I like to go back to the pioneers, I like to read about what the first and maybe the second generation of Theosophists did, and how they shared the knowledge. It was very difficult. It was very challenging. It was, today a national speaker either drives the car to the meeting, or now during the pandemic, it's a Zoom meeting, or we sit on the plane. But in the old days, it was very, very strenuous to travel, and not as easy as today. So we
Yes.
have to admire those pioneers.
They are amazing. I don't know if I'm sure you've probably read some of old diary leaves and Olcott's trips. Oh my gosh.
Yes, yes, that too.
Ox cart up and down the bumpy roads and so forth. It's probably amazing. I think that studying biography probably has a benefit we may or may not be aware of. And I think that maybe part of their spirit and their tenacity is transmitted to us as we read it. It's almost like being with that person and having a personal blessing on our lives as we research and we study some of the early Theosophists. What do you think about that?
Yes, I completely agree. Absolutely agree. Now, it doesn't matter if it's Theosophist or not Theosophist. Let's take Paracelsus. I think I don't know how many biographies about him, or Rudolf Steiner. Rudolf Steiner was a Theosophist first, and he could never have created his own organization if he wouldn't have been a Theosophist first. They provided the platform. I also think about Krishnamurti. If Leadbeater and Annie Besant wouldn't have brought him to Europe, wouldn't have given him the education, he never would have become Krishnamurti. I try to remember that, even if people didn't stay with the organization, it was a platform and they were able to evolve. One thing I noticed, especially with people like Paracelsus, or I can't remember the other name now, but there are biographers who just focus maybe on the history and who don't believe in occultism, or Franz Anton Mesmer, for example. Yeah, Franz Anton Mesmer. There's a huge difference in the approach. And this is where we have to synthesize somehow, okay? Because anybody who does not believe in the invisible world and writes a biography will write it completely differently than somebody who believes in the invisible world and believes in magic and is an occultist. So very, very fascinating. I have learned a lot reading all these books. Mm-hmm.
They do help unlock something in our soul that may have been locked away by the conventional religion and the conventional beliefs that we've been given, which is very much left brain.
Yeah.
So I would just, in finishing up, I wonder if there's any piece of advice or anything that you might want to say to people in the audience that means something to you, or give them something.
Well, I strongly believe that we all have to find the guru within, that we have to find our own path. And your path, Anne, is not the same as my path. We might, hopefully, will end up at the same place. But we have to trust our intuition. And this is what we have to work on. This is one thing that I really admired with Dora Kunz, that she was trusted her intuition when she was so young. And this is something that we can even practice, because if we see that we trust our intuition and then things work out, we rely on it more and more. And that's the most important thing. I think that's for me, the biggest help. Trust yourself. Trust that you will find your guru, that you have to listen to your inner voice, and that that will help you to reach your higher self and let your higher self in as more and more often as you get older.
And that's such wonderful advice. We don't have to be a Dora Kunz. We don't have to be majorly clairaudient or clairvoyant or read auras or anything, but we all have the ability to be connected to our inner self, our higher selves, and to get information about how to live our lives and what we need to be doing, even in the present moment.
Yes,
So thank you for that. Yes.
Yes, and this is the thing, not everybody can be like HPB, not everybody can be the president of the Theosophical Society. Or so find your place. Where can you help? And in this way, I thought Constanze Wachtmeister became my guiding light, because she said, okay, I want to serve HPB. And when she passed away, how can I help the Theosophical Society? That's what's important. What can you give? What are your strengths that you can share? Either knowledge, and even if it's only within the lodge, be there to help, the board, help the attend the meetings, come up with ideas. We all have a way to find what's best for us, and to help at the same time others.
And that may not be exactly the path for everyone, but I can say that if that is the path and that is what we choose to do, we always receive more than we give.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Well, thank you. Thank you so much for being here, Susanna. Take care, and I hope that we'll see you soon.
Me too. I hope so. Hopefully next year at the convention.
Yes, in person, we hope.
Bye-bye.
Bye.